Hey folks, welcome into the BN Cubs Podcast. I'm Brett Taylor. That's Michael Cerami. We are here to discuss the Cubs a week ahead of the winter meetings, thanks to our friends at Ankin Law, 312-6 injury law made personal. Thanks, Howard. Okay, Cubs have, since we last talked, they did sign Scott Kingery to a minor league deal.
Ooh.
It was funny. I sent out a tweet that was just like, it's a little crazy. It's December 2nd was when I sent it. And I'm like, it's a little crazy that still, like a month into the offseason, the Cubs had not picked up anyone on waivers and they hadn't signed anyone to a minor league deal. Okay. And that's like their bread and butter, especially when they have 9 open spots on the 40-man. And not 45 minutes later, there's the announcement that they signed Scott
Obviously,
Kingery.
Jed was scrolling and he went, Carter, release the news of Kingery.
Or he's like, who's going to say yes if we offer them a minor league deal like in the next 5 minutes? Who's going to say, oh, Scott Kingery? Okay, yeah. No, I don't mean to denigrate the move. It's a pure depth. He's very versatile. A fun, interesting, I suppose, side story about Kingery. I would think about him often as one of these guys who, he had that fantastic young season with the Phillies, right? And it came right after he had signed this super pre-arbitration extension, signed for $24 million. And then he, breaks out, has this huge year. And of course, everyone's like, what an idiot. Why do they take these deals? Why do these players do this? Da, 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 da. And I always think in all of these situations, I always think, yeah, but sometimes things fall apart and you're going to be just so ecstatic that you signed that deal. And Kingery has become now probably the strongest example of why sometimes you take the money because you never know.
There was an Astros guy too, right?
Yeah, Jonathan Singleton signed pre-arb one, and he got $10 million, and otherwise would have got nothing. And there was
David Bodie. David
Bodie's bring it back home.
I know it's not the same thing, but it's
he would have,
similar.
Like what does he get? Does he get tendered once or twice maybe in arbitration?
Yeah, but he definitely made more money.
He's not getting $15 million, which is what he ended up getting.
He was making like $5 million a year just hanging out in Iowa, riding the bus, probably being such a big shot with all the minor leaguers who make no money. I mean, you're probably the king.
I can get you 2 McRibs.
Yeah, right.
So anyway, that's my, my general point to if the Cubs want to approach anyone about an extension, just think about it, guys, just in case, maybe think about it.
I got 2 thoughts on that, and you could take this either way. Is just one, it's funny how like the years in which that's all they're doing, we're like, oh, classic Cubs. I mean, we joke. There's some people that are very serious about that and not realizing that signing these deals doesn't impact anything. But we're like, well, there must not be focusing on
the minor, not deals. Extensions. You're talking about minor league deals.
Yeah, minor league signings, Scott Kingery. Right? Yeah. And then this year, they're not doing any, and no one is like, oh, they must be focusing on the big fish. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
cuts one way.
It only goes one way, right? I will say that, they offered PCA his deal, which I think they ended up saying it was worth a little bit more than it was initially reported at $75 million or so.
There must have been something with options or escalators. I remember the language was sort of like, well, that's not exactly what the deal was, but whatever.
Yeah. And so they suggested that they're going to try, the implication of the reports out there is that they're going to try again this offseason to extend PCA, which, part of me thinks, well, that's going to be just as hard. Like maybe the number moves north, but it's just as difficult. But you know what I just sort of realized is there is one reason why the Cubs might be a little more inclined to try to get something done. And that's the one thing PCA may accomplish, regardless of how successful like his floor is offensively, is that he's likely to get a lot of counting stats. And because he's already got the stolen bases, homers, RBI, like those are things, runs that he's going to do. Even if he hits 220, it's going to happen. And that is like precisely what all of
it'll goose
the arbitration raises are based on. And so he might be a candidate to accelerate through the ARB system. And thus the value of extending him and getting that cost certainty is actually a little bit more important for the Cubs than it would be on another guy who's they might want to have extended anyway. Like, let's say they wanted to extend Matt Shaw because they like really believe in him.
Yeah. Right.
It's just a different story. He's not going to hit 30 homers or steal 30 it's different for a guy like PCA. And he already has this year under his belt So that's a big lift up
Yep.
because he had a ton of the counting stats this year.
And he's going to be a Super 2, so he's going to have 4 years at arbitration. And he was already an All-Star, which they do count.
Yeah,
and he has huge Gold Glove. Yeah, but he also has huge like media presence and sort of and that there's one of the factors is like importance to the organization or visibility. Like
they count
stuff,
that.
Yeah,
I mean, narratively, why not?
Yeah,
right?
Yes, exactly. It's not a formula, but it's in there. And so, yeah, that's a good point. He is someone who stands to do very well in arbitration, with, of course, the caveat that we saw in the second half, things can go very sideways. He was basically the steepest fall off in all of baseball in terms of offense production in the first half and the second half. Like, he was it.
I mean, to be fair, he had a higher fall off to go, right?
Sure.
Like,
but he was pretty bad in the second half at the plate. And, certainly thankful that he has the legs and the glove to boost that value. But that definitely, for me, is what makes any kind of offseason extension discussion borderline impossible. Because
but part of me is just, this is not even close to what we wanted to talk about, but I'm actually really interested in it now, is his baseline, as we know, being so significant because of the speed and the defense, obviously. But I also think at this point, as he evolves, I have a hard time imagining him being much worse than a league average bat.
But that's not really the question, right? The question is, in his mind, I can be the dude in the first half. And in the Cubs' mind, it's, what if he's the guy in the second half?
Well,
because those happen in a single year, how could they ever meet in the middle?
Yeah.
Like, it seems impossible to me.
But I guess what I'm saying is I think PCA can think he could be the guy in the first half. The Cubs shouldn't think he's going to be anything less than, in my opinion, than a league average bat with his other stuff. And so with his other stuff as a league average bat, he's still a 4-WAR player. Right?
Yeah. But you have him for another 5 years or whatever. Like,
but he's young. He's going to be a young free agent too.
Yeah. But I mean, the whole point of signing these super long extensions, it's not just the cost control. It's that you think you're going to lose them otherwise in free agency, and you're willing to pay very far in advance to ensure that you don't. It's not that they're going to lose him soon. It's like, it's why it's a totally different discussion, but it's sort of philosophically the same as why the Cubs never extended Jake Arrieta, why they didn't extend Justin Steele, where it's like, it's not that you don't love the player and want to have them for many more years. It's the question of, but we already have them for, 3, 4, 5 years on what are effectively 1-year deals with team options. It's like the greatest contract in history is what you already have. This was a fun little digression here at the top.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna get into the fun stuff. We know the winter meetings are coming, Brett. Let's
So
set us up.
The winter meetings, obviously best part of the off season. It's very much like the trade deadline, not in as much as it's quite as active as the trade deadline in such a condensed time, but it is like this check mark of the transaction period where it's like, okay, this is when we know it's going to be fun and exciting. And I dig that. I love that. I love that it's 4 days. I love that there are not only so many transactions that take place, but also the rumors that sort of rub up against all those transactions. That's where the fun.
There's usually like 1 or 2 names that emerge that you're like, oh, like the Twins are serious about Byron Buxton being a trade chip, even if he's not dealt. Or, you know what? The Nationals wound up extending Mackenzie Gore or something stupid. You know what I mean? Like that,
stuff like that. Yes.
It always happens. And you're like, okay, now we have, our foundation. I like to think of the offseason as these landmarks where you're like, you get beyond this, you get beyond this, and you get beyond this. And then it becomes, the winter meetings is like, it's both the peak and the start though, because once you hit that, all of these the Rule 5 draft happens, all of these key moments are settled. And now it's like, it's open
all
season. There's nothing left besides arbitration stuff, but that's not going to really affect the Cubs this year.
Roster wise.
it just doesn't matter. They have a lot of space and they don't have a lot of money committed to our level players. So this is really going to be it. And I can't wait to see what happens.
Well, and it's, baseball doesn't have a transaction deadline in the offseason. And it doesn't have a cap like the other sports that drives this sort of urgency of activity. But what it does have is when you do have this week where every team and every agent knows that a lot of activity is going to happen, everyone sort of like has come together and agreed that that's going to happen. That does create pressure to get things done. It's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. It creates pressure to get things done because you don't want to be left dusted and miss out on your preferred targets because this happened, which fed this, which fed this, which fed this. And so I think
there's one executive in baseball who does not feel the pressure to get things done on anyone other's timeline besides himself. And that's Jed Hoyer, for better or for worse. I'm not even trying to be negative.
No, it's just true.
He does not seem to, whether that's his actual feeling or not, or if it's just like his strategic philosophy, and it's forced. He holds to that. He is not a guy that's like pushed into these things. Often that makes us sad, but
I think or again, Michael's right to make the distinction. We don't actually know this about Jed. We just have the outside perception based on we've covered a million deadlines of the little ones and big ones. And the Cubs under Jed Hoyer, even more so than under Theo Epstein, are just, I think, the most extreme in terms of like, nope, if we can wait to the very last second on something, we're going to.
Yeah. We're being dead serious for those who are like, oh, okay, I kind of get you. No, we are acutely aware of it because we are often standing by to write up things at these deadlines. And we're like, God, the Cubs still haven't, like, it's the tiniest decision. They wait maximum time to get anything done.
Because there's always that super small chance that there might be a little extra leverage to gain or some other thing will shake out. And I don't know how often I feel like I've seen it pay off, but I think, and I was thinking about this today. What was I writing about? Oh, the Kyle Tucker visiting with the Blue Jays report. I don't think the Cubs are going to be seriously involved on Kyle Tucker. I think his market would have to just completely collapse for them to be a fallback option. But what I do, and I also don't think they're going to be involved in the markets that are directly impacted by Tucker signing, Cody Bellinger or the, Bo Bichette. I think there's a relationship there because of the Blue Jays. But what I wonder is when you're talking about $300 million commitment plus, the teams that miss out on that it's not hard to imagine them being like, you know what, maybe we can push a little harder on Imai or Framber Valdez or, whoever, not because it's like we missed out on this player, so we need to get this player. It's, well, we had a lot of money earmarked that was available and now we aren't going to use it. Maybe we can afford to go a little more aggressively somewhere else. And what I wonder is, does that at all make the other suitors for the pitchers feel pressure to be like, you know what, right now, I'm just picking a team. The Yankees are kind of holding back a little bit because they want to know what's going to happen with Kyle Tucker. I'm not saying that that's actually true. I'm just saying, we may have so the Cubs might slide in and say, you know what, we have a window, and say they love, I don't know, say they did love Framber Valdez and they know he's going to get, $200 million. They're like, you know what, if we throw in an extra 10 million right now and say, hey, but we need you to sign Monday, maybe you get that deal done. And it's almost like the opposite of waiting for a deadline that forces the action. And it's sort of like trying to get out in front of.
Yeah, but that's exactly what I'm not saying it's exactly what we want them to do. That's exactly what they don't ever do.
I know, completely.
And
so it's almost
precisely what they don't.
Right. I'm almost not even wondering it about the Cubs. It's a wish casting on the Cubs, and it's wondering it about the rest of the league.
Yeah.
Being like,
got it.
What's going to happen if you are the team that's always waiting? But
sometimes you end up with Cody Bellinger, in spring training, or Alex Bregman. They almost got. That's
for sure. For sure.
You know what? I not to take this in a slightly different, but I do think I'm starting to wonder that it won't be a trend until this year. But I am so interested to see what happens this March. If there is another free agent that is still on the board, that's like a significant free agent. We have now seen two springs in a row, Cody and then Bregman, that the Cubs went, okay, it's you've got like not a lot of options here. Maybe that is something that they are, if they do it 3 times in a row, if there's a significant offer to a big free agent for real money, doesn't have to be as big as Bregman's offer, Bellinger's or whatever, but something like that. Yeah. I will start to wonder if they are like, nope, we think that there's a chance that whoever is left at that point
can make it work,
get some value, out of.
They do, they have done it many times with relievers. We always talk about the waiver claims and the minor league deals and all that, but there's actually a third sort of thing that they have often done the last 5 years, which is the tier sort of, it's like third tier relievers who are like really good, but not good enough to be targeted early on, who then are still waiting in February to sign. Everyone agrees they're not going to have to take a minor league deal. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a big league deal, but it's going to be a cheap big league deal. And then the Cubs wait and they're like, you know what? We like 6 of you equally. Whichever one of you takes a 1 year, $3 million deal, that you got it. Yeah. So I could, I guess, make an argument that this is just the same thing on a bigger scale, bigger in terms of dollars, but then also just sort of broader in terms of we'll take whatever guy at whatever position is left over. I tend to think, my guess is that was a little more idiosyncratic to Cody Bellinger and Alex Bregman specifically.
Yeah.
What you wonder.
That's the testing. Though.
Well, and what's interesting is this year, because the pitching group that's available, both trade and free agency, is so big. You wonder if there's going to be some really compelling guys in relief and starting that fall through, and the Cubs decide, you know what? Yeah, we already added Michael King in December, and we don't necessarily have a spot, but we really, I don't know who's a good example. Yeah. We're like, but we really like him. We think he projects well, and he's been held up by his qualifying offer. Screw it. We'll do it.
Yeah. I really do. I do think Zac Gallen, listen, he could sign before this pod is out. He strikes me as the sort of guy that because it's like what he's done, but what he's connected to, like, it's just a weird zone. He might find a believer out there, and that would change everything, right? That's all it takes. Because there's a reason everyone knows his name. He was a great pitcher very recently and is still quite young. But I could see him being a sort of,
that's often what we see with guys in this tier, right?
Mm-hmm. Is that's true. And listen, the Cubs, I mean, it would have been cool if they got a second one for Shota, I guess, but also maybe Shota's just ends up being good. But they will get one for Tucker. So a pick of their own. So, the opportunity cost of signing some of those guys is reduced. But yeah, I think it's interesting. I'm interested to see. I'm just like really curious, because if it happens again, I'm going to, talk about this as like, okay, nope, this might be a legitimate strategy of the front office to let those players filter down to them and then figure out how they can take advantage of a reduced market or whatever for one of those guys. And they don't have to be people that are not good. Bellinger had a great season last year. Bregman had a good season. It's possible. So I find that interesting.
Let's not wrap up winter meetings discussion, but let's frame it this way. What, within the context of what's realistic, and you can mention what the report is on that in terms of what the Cubs have left to work with. What do they need to do next week? The winter meetings, like actually complete, where you're like, okay, I'm feeling like that was a successful winter meetings, and I'm feeling good about where things are going for the rest of the offseason.
I mean, okay, I'm going to start with your question, and then we'll lead into that second piece of the financial component that kind of frames everything. But I don't want to say like, well, they need to get a starting pitcher signed next week, because
even if the market's moving, because if things are cooking, then it does become like I need you to get it done next week, because otherwise you're holding the bag.
I know, but I think one of the concerns I have is that Imai hasn't done his city visits yet and won't complete those by the end of the winter meetings. And if he is the guy that they might want, are you really going to move on Michael King before you know if you have a chance at Imai? I don't know.
It's a good question.
I don't know if, and that'll be how I think about it, because he does have a deadline coming up, which is funny because in one sense, he should be the guy with feeling the most pressure to get things moving. But I think I saw that he's going to be doing team meetings and they won't be done. So
because his deadline isn't until January 2nd. So there's still quite a bit of time. So
what I will say that I do hope happens is the relief side, not the starting pitching side. I think they're not done in the bullpen. I think they can't be done in the bullpen.
Yeah.
Well, at least in terms of the significant additions, they will make all their other additions and whatever. But they need to get someone. And we'll talk about one of those options later in our transaction corner. But like the realistic path here, I still really like Pete Fairbanks, and I really think he's a good fit. I was, a little bummed to see Devin Williams sign because I had heard that the Cubs and Williams had some interest in figuring something out, which who knows what that ultimately means. A lot of teams are showing interest in all sorts of players this time of the year, but that was on my radar. And Helsley as well. Both of those guys are guys I heard the Cubs did have interest in. So on the one hand, I do hope they, get something done. I'm not super convinced, but on the other hand, just like with Dylan Cease, I can tell you that they were talking about signing these guys like that was, a possibility. And so I'm trying to feel the optimism. And then,
which can I just slide in and make a point about that?
Yeah.
That isn't, I think a lot of people, they see those reports or hear those things that Michael's saying or that I'm saying as like a defense of the Cubs. They hear it as like but they tried, No. That's not what we're saying. We're saying looking forward, if it's true that they were legitimately talking about these players and trying to sign them, then that is suggestive of what might happen going forward. That's what we care about. That's the point.
And to put an even finer point on that, let's say, okay, let's get into some of this specific stuff now. We beat around the bush too long. There was a report from was it Sahadev who had the Dylan Cease? Okay, I think so. Sahadev Sharma at The Athletic. Maybe Patrick Mooney was on it too. I'm not sure. Read both of their stuff. They're great. You guys know if you listen to us that we love them. That the Cubs, were legitimately in on Dylan Cease up until the bidding got approached or went beyond 200 million. Deferred or not, it's kind of besides the point. Okay. The important takeaway there is assuming that's true, which we do assume that's true.
If they're reporting it, it's true.
Yes. Then that means the Cubs are objectively this offseason willing to spend that much money on a starting pitcher. Now, that starting pitcher might have been only Dylan Cease, the only guy that they were willing to do that. And that can effectively change the tenor of the conversation. But that's not really the point. The point is they had 180, 175, 150 million plus dollars to spend on a starting pitcher this offseason. Again, maybe they only wanted that for Dylan Cease, but that's still a signal about their finances, which we can get into in a second. But before I do talk about that Bruce Levine report, did you have anything else to add about the whiff on Dylan Cease? Insofar as they were apparently willing to go significant lengths to sign him.
Yeah, I mean it's heartening from the perspective that it's nice to know they aren't categorically out on guys that pitchers are past a certain tier, right? Like it allows me to say, for example, okay, Tatsuya Imai, still a possibility, still if they are, it doesn't mean they like him, doesn't mean they actually will go after him. It's just saying I don't have to, as a fan, think, well, that's not a guy they can possibly sign. Now, I think that they are still probably extremely careful about that. Again, they have not signed a 9-figure pitcher in 8 years. So yeah, I think they're probably still really cautious about that. And I think there were characteristics about Dylan Cease's game that, although some of it gave me personally pause going forward, are sufficiently unique that, maybe they just really dug in. Like, we'll find out.
There's also a complete alternative reality that no one ever wants to contemplate when these things happen. In that Sahadev Sharma's report comes out and says the Cubs were never in on Dylan Cease, as they don't believe in free agent pitcher contracts that approach or exceed $200 million as an organizational philosophy. That could have happened. And alternatively, in the world where, we take it as, I take it on faith that Sahadev Sharma is correct when he reports that. there's a whole subset of people that think like the Cubs push this out there because it makes them look good.
I've
which
never understood that.
it doesn't
never
make
understood
them look
that.
good. So you're incorrectly evaluating the value of, of putting something like that out there. It's no one's like, oh, good. They didn't.
I'm going to buy more tickets for 2026 because they
right.
missed on Dylan Cease.
Right. It's only valuable and to thread the needle of where we're coming from of when we see it insofar as, okay, tentatively, as we move forward over the next 6 to 8 weeks, we suspect the Cubs have the money to do this. Now, if we get to the end of the offseason and they didn't sign any of these guys, okay, then you're correct. But that's not where we are right now.
Well, and even in that, I might say they still could have and didn't. So then the conversation turns to simply, well, you failed to execute on what you wanted to do this offseason. And that was a failure. It wasn't a financial failure. It was a failure of execution.
Yeah. And you know what? I don't think any front office gets enough shame for
debit.
Debit that for failing to execute things. It's like, sometimes even at the deadline, I don't want to take away, or I don't want to give the Cubs more agency than they have in any sort of, but like there are deals that are done where you're like, you're telling me that was not accomplishable for you. Like, was your head not in that space because you didn't foresee it as a realistic possibility? Like, what was the gap of and it's not, sometimes it's explained away by this GM liked this player specifically or whatever. This agent had a relationship, but it's like sometimes having that other player or that relationship is also part of your job to get something done. Like it's still, whether or not it was within your control in that moment, there's lead up time to that sort of thing that you need to be able to accomplish your goals regardless of how, I don't know. I think the
evaluation. Yeah. And the evaluation can't just be, well, did you make the playoffs the next year or did you win 90 games?
Right.
It's like, no, we are allowed to analyze all of these things in all directions. We're allowed to say, okay, it is great that I'm not even talking about the Cubs, but like, yeah, it's great you won 95 games or whatever, but you know what? You did failed to do this, and this was an issue. I don't think similar to how we've often had the conversation when the Cubs have had a bad year or part of a rebuild. We're like, yeah, but you know what? I like what I'm seeing here. I like what I'm seeing here. For example,
go on.
Cubs. I was just going to say, for example, Cubs farm system right now is going to come in you'll see it over the next 12 months. It's not good. It's not good.
No. So. And that's a problem. Because unlike the last time this happened, they didn't win anything yet.
Yeah. Well, it's hidden a little by the fact that although they didn't win anything yet, they do have these guys that have just, emerged. Right. So it looks really healthy because Cade Horton's coming through.
That does buy them more time. Like PCA, Matt Shaw,
and they get credit. Like they did,
right,
like they
Miguel
did make
Amaya,
that.
Cade Horton.
Yeah, they made that happen. They get credit for that, but it is definitely obscuring the fact that if you are a prospect nerd and you sort of dig in on the system, you look down and you're like, oh crap, they've had like several rough years in a row.
Well, and you know where it matters because a lot of times people will I'm going to counter myself. A lot of people will do the thing that I just did. It's like, well, yeah, they might have a bad prospect system, but it's like the majors wins that matter. And look at all these young players. It's like, yeah, cool, great. You know how they got Michael Busch? Like trading prospects for him. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like there's other uses for those players as assets. And if you don't generate that, like that's how the Dodgers do a lot of what they do. A lot of what they do. So anyway, that's the value. So let's shift. Let's see if Addison's a legit producer and let's see if we can inject. And if not, we're just going to explain it. Bruce Levine's comments on, I believe it was 670 to the score. Was that today, Brett, that he made those comments?
This morning.
670 to the score. Hit it, Addison.
Kyle Tucker reportedly visited Toronto yesterday. Patrick Mooney in The Athletic reported this morning that the Cubs bowed out of the Dylan Cease sweepstakes at $200 million. Where are the Cubs stand in their offseason plans, Bruce?
Well, the one thing that type of report shows you is that the Cubs are, number one, letting people know they're going to spend money, and number two, even though they finished second, there is, according to my sources, upwards of $50 to $60 million yet to be spent on this year's payroll. There's that flexibility in there for the Cubs right now to probably spend somewhere between 45, $55 million, which would even keep them from going over the luxury tax number at about 245.
Basically, he went on the score and said that the Cubs have between 50 to 60 million more in 2026 payroll to add. He then retreated a little bit to say between 45 and 55 million. In either case, that is significant.
He referenced the luxury tax, like staying under the luxury tax, in which, like, we looked it up, Rust Resource at Fangraphs, which is great, by the way. Cubs have like 48 or something million underneath that right now.
Yeah. And so that is a pretty significant report, in my opinion, because what I was the assumption that I had been operating under, and when I wrote the payroll piece that I looked at previously, is that the Cubs, playoff run notwithstanding, wanted to finish somewhere around 220, 225 million. And then you preserve maybe another 5 or 10 million for in-season moves. So that was a solid 15 to 20 million less in spending capability that I had earmarked than what Bruce Levine is reporting. Does that make you more optimistic? Do you believe that? Do you buy it? Do you think that he's just estimating it based on the luxury tax? Like, where are you taking that?
Well, so I dig it. I was glad to hear it. I buy it, but then I immediately start doing the math, and I'm like, okay, well, let's say they signed Michael King for $3 and $75. Well, there's 25. Boom. So then say they had 20 left. Well, and they signed Pete Fairbanks, and he gets 12 annually. Well, boom. So then you're down to like 8, and then it's like, oh, that's a bench bat, and then that's it, off season over, and you've committed all that money, which is a good that version of an off season is
I'll
what
take
I would
that right now. By the way.
Listen, if it was literally that, if it was the King, Fairbanks, and then Ref Snyder, that's the off season, that's a good
and Phil
off season.
Maton.
And yes, Phil Maton. Yeah. So that's not what I'm saying. I'm only saying that, like, people hear 45 to 50 is available, and they're like, dude, they can do so much. They can do, but it's like, wait a minute, start counting.
Well, if you had a $30 million player.
Well, because I think people will hear that and they'll be like, dude, they can get a starting pitcher and a huge bat. And it's like, okay, maybe if they trade for a starting pitcher.
Now, see, that is where things get interesting, because if you do successfully pull off a trade and you still have unless, of course, Sandy Alcantara is making 18 million. So it's like, if he's the guy that you get, you're not really saving that much money, but it's possible. I do wonder if in that 50 to 60 million, if he's, subtracting correctly, the 10 million or so that they will save from whatever they want to spend. And then that's the case, then we're talking about a much different thing.
And if that 10 million is actually the, like, okay, if we do need that in season, we're okay with going over the luxury tax. You know what I mean? We don't know where they are in terms of.
But I wrote this at the outset of the offseason too. There's never been a better year to go over, because almost no matter what you do, you will go back under whatever new rule luxury tax they have in place for 2027.
Seems likely, yeah.
There's so much money coming off the books. Yeah. And now even more because of Shota.
Yeah. Yep.
The way that played out, that wasn't going to be the case. We all sort of assumed he was just going to be under contract for 3 more years.
Right.
And now his money went up this year and is going to 0 next year. So
and if there's luxury,
is even more significant.
I mean, under the last CBA, that first year of the luxury tax in the first year of the new CBA shot way up.
Yeah, I think it went from 208 to 231. I want to say.
I forget, but it was tens of millions. And so, I think there's that argument. Flip side is, if you're worried about losing a year and incurring more biblical losses because of a lost season or part of a lost season in 2027. I think if they traded for a starting pitcher, which I wouldn't want to be about the money. Like, it would need to be that, no, we just really love Mackenzie Gore and this was a good trade fit. But if that were to happen, then yeah, man, you better start looking at big bats and figuring out like, oh, maybe we can get Okamoto or, whatever. Like
Okamoto is the guy that I think
I just don't want to see them leave money on the table.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's
do you think that like there's a reason for that? Or do you believe? I have two questions for you. I've been wanting to ask you. I haven't called you yet this morning to talk about it. I'm going to ask you this in two different ways. First, give me the player you want the most for 2026 and beyond, like almost contract aside, between Bo Bichette, Alex Bregman, and Okamoto. Like, is there? You could include the money if you want a little bit.
I was going to say, do I have to think about the long-term impact?
Sure. Why don't you just think about their age and future? I mean, you don't have to be like, I don't want to get to a point where we're like, well, Okamoto is going to be, what if he only costs $60 million? I don't know.
Right.
Who knows?
Well, because it's, translating over from Japan and because of the potential for less impact, it's not like I would choose Okamoto if they all cost exactly the same. I don't think I would do that. I'd probably pick Bo Bichette just because he's the youngest, and so you have more time to get his peak physical window. I don't love Bregman.
Okay.
I worry about his
kind of what I want to pull out.
I worry about his aging a little bit. I didn't love him last year for the Cubs. I remember when they missed, my reaction to it, and I wrote it up at the end, was sort of like, I think he would have helped in 2025, would have been a good fit. I would have worried beyond that. And I know,
but had they gotten him with an opt-out, it kind of might have been perfect.
Yeah, he did miss like the last 2 months or whatever. I mean, so
that's when Matt Shaw was his best. not how that works.
And then with Bo Bichette, I just, I don't know. I think 2024 was pretty scary, given like how abysmal he was. Yeah, it came out of nowhere. And there was nothing you go back and look at it, and it's like, no, he was just bad. There was no like, yeah, but you know what? He was really unlucky with this. No, he's just bad. And then this year he was amazing. And
let me look at this. 2019, he's age 21, 143 weighted runs created plus, then 120, then 122, then 129, then 124, leading into his age 26 season, 70 weighted runs created plus.
And then he was great again this year. So.
And then this year, 134, basically his best season.
Yeah.
His best offensive season.
So point is, if you're telling me Bregman's going to get 150, and you're telling me Bo Bichette's going to get 200, and you're telling me Okamoto's going to get 60, I'm not counting the Cubs dollars. I'm not trying to save Tom Ricketts money, but I do understand there's a budget and the future does matter and all these things. Well, given that Okamoto, if he's going to succeed, is like right now, this is when it's going to be his most valuable because he's 29, 30. Like that's a good fit for the Cubs. That makes sense to me. The other two guys, it feels like you're just trying to shoehorn it in.
Yeah, it's true. But part of me feels like the part that's left unsaid there is that it's like, yeah, you get Okamoto and then you can also get Pete Fairbanks. But it's like, what if you get Okamoto and then you don't get Pete Fairbanks? Right. Then should you have just gotten Alex Bregman or whatever, Yep. That's the thing, that the catch that always happens. And it's true. It's 100%. And it would be on. Fact, but it's like,
that's exactly what we're talking about when we say, then you have to execute. And we can, if you're going to coordinate moves like that, then you better pull it off.
Remember when they coordinated Starlin and Zobrist? That was fun.
I do. That was fun. That was winter meetings. Played out. Yeah, that was fun.
That was still when I was part-time at BN because I was working at I was a consultant at a hospital in California, and I was like, oh my God, stuff's going on. And I had to pretend I was working on other stuff. But I wasn't. All right. You want to switch to the transaction corner?
Yep, do it.
So this week's transaction corner is brought to you by our good friends at Feldco. Feldco, the home renewal experts. Bleacher Nation is proud to partner with Feldco. For almost 50 years, Feldco has been transforming Chicagoland homes with their windows, siding, doors, and roofing. Feldco is family-owned, and prides themselves on delighting their customers. With products made in the U.S. and designed specifically for the Midwest, Feldco offers the perfect balance of beauty and energy efficiency. Thank you, Feldco. You've been a great partner for us all year. You've sponsored the home run posts and some other weather reports at Bleacher Nation. And, just a little extra love here in December. It was a good first year working with you guys. We appreciate you.
He's going to clip out this part and send it
directly to them.
Just so you know. Hey. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about is it's almost more conceptual than the player, but we talk often about how obviously the Cubs need to add in the bullpen still, even after Phil Maton. About how, even though we love Daniel Palencia at the back, they still need more impact at the back of the bullpen. We've talked about Ryan Helsley. We talked about Devin Williams. We talked about Pete Fairbanks. These are in rumors, Cubs connections, all of this stuff. And it occurred to me that there's a guy that's in that market that we just never mention at all. Just never comes up. It's like, why would we even mention it? And I wanted to just tease that out a little bit. And that pitcher is Edwin Diaz. Now, Edwin Diaz is the best reliever on the market. Easily, obviously.
Maybe
he's the guy.
Where would you put him in baseball right now?
I mean, when he's healthy and clicking, he's a top 5 guy. Like
easily, obviously. I think.
And so it's pretty obvious that a team that has lots of needs at the back of the bullpen, right, would benefit from having one of the best 5 relievers in baseball. And he's available. And yet we never even mention his name. I'm not sure that I have written his name this offseason on the site other than to say, like, he's, when the Mets signed Devin Williams, it's like, well, they still are interested in Edwin Diaz. That's like it. And so I just wanted to touch that with, like, well, let's say he was going to get 5 years and $100 million, $20 million. We know the Cubs have that money. We know they have it available. They had plenty more for Dylan Cease. Why don't they discuss, and why don't we discuss Edwin Diaz for the Cubs?
It's what's hard about that is that, like, we don't even discuss Robert Suárez, who
I left him aside, because he was sort of maybe some interest at the deadline, and sort of like we've kind of touched on him a little bit, but as far as this like next step down.
I don't know. I think the Cubs have shown us enough with their actions that we just know that it's not a guy that they're going to pursue. It's even different to me than like Kyle Tucker, who it's like, you know what? If you were to put me on, the edge of the wall and say, pick one guy who the Cubs are going to sign this year. Is it going to be Kyle Tucker for $350 million or Edwin Diaz at $100 million? I think it's way more likely that they sign Kyle Tucker to $350 million. And that's weird, but I think I believe that. I mean, I think it just doesn't strike me as the sort of thing they do. Now, with that said, I don't want the Cubs to give Edwin Diaz $100 million, I don't think, but I also I do get jealous when other teams go get those guys for that price. And it does work out occasionally. Like, it's not always a disaster. Tanner Scott did not work out for the Dodgers last year.
Well, I'm going to slide in real quick.
Yeah.
And give you a little gotcha here. So who was the best reliever on the market last year? Free agency. Who was everyone agreed was the best reliever?
It had to be Tanner Scott, right?
Yeah. Who was the runner-up team for signing Tanner Scott?
The Cubs.
So what you're saying is the Cubs do go after the top reliever on the market sometimes.
Well, yeah, sure. But that was also late in the offseason, which is kind of goes to what we were talking about last year, and a solid 50% of what Edwin Diaz is going to get.
What did Tanner Scott's his deal was weird because it had a ton of deferrals.
I think the Cubs offer was like $54 million and the Dodgers was like 60, but with deferrals, it was like 52.
Yeah.
And Edwin Diaz is looking to get $100 million.
Yeah.
So, like it's not to say that they go after, it's like, relative to their market, Tanner Scott was, but Edwin Diaz is in a different tier. Tanner Scott is maybe Robert Suárez this year, is maybe Devin Williams this year. And those are guys the Cubs went after. Edwin Diaz is Kyle Tucker or Shohei Ohtani, in their relative position class. But I'm trying to think of think about it this way. I think Aroldis Chapman was the first guy to get one of those oh my God.
Yes.
Free agent deals. And it was like $85 million as a reliever, 85 or 90 million. And guess what?
Blew away records.
Yeah, he's pitching 8 years after that, and still, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't have to be a disaster. You just have to be right. And here's where I'll get is: do you think let's say Edwin Diaz is Edwin Diaz. Actually, I'm going to ask you this. If the Cubs could guarantee that Edwin Diaz was going to have the same season he just had, do you think they would give him $100 million? Or do you think that even in that scenario, they don't value that? Like, is it the risk, or is it that we literally don't think it's worth this much money to do that?
That's such a fun question, because instinctively I'm like, wait a minute. If you knew for 5 years he was going to be one of the best 5 relievers in baseball, every team should say yes. 20 million for that is like a steal. But if your payroll is 100 million, is it philosophically worth 20% of your payroll to get that? Yeah, I think for the Cubs the answer should be yes. I think they should be,
I literally wonder if he might not. They might say, no, we don't actually think that.
I think it's almost beside the point, and I think you'd agree. I think it's the risk is really what drives it more, is that the risk of like having such a big chunk of your payroll being dead money because of volatility in relievers. And Edwin Diaz has actually shown that in his career. He had at least the one really horrible year right after coming to the Mets, I think, in the trade.
Yeah, in 2019. But I mean,
and so
every other year he's been like a 2 WAR plus.
Yeah, he's
reliever, which is insane.
He's ridiculous. So anyway, I set all this up, and then I'm going to go out the other side of my mouth. Like, I know they're not going after Edwin Diaz. I'm not even arguing necessarily that they should be. I just think it's interesting that we don't even talk about it, and putting a finger on exactly why that is tricky in light of the Tanner Scott pursuit last year, because otherwise it would have been very easy to say, well, they literally don't ever sign multi-year relievers at all. Yeah. So they're not going to sign the most expensive multi-year reliever ever.
So, but wait, pause on that thought though.
Well, then you're like, well, but they did sign Craig Kimbrell, but to Michael's point, that was the very June. Late. Yeah. But they did just sign Phil Maton to a 2-year deal. Yeah. So, they ripped the Band-Aid off.
Do you think, here's a last question that I have for you. Do you think that there's, this is not the superstar argument. I don't mean that. I just mean, because I don't mean so much of the other stuff that comes with that. But I guess what I'm getting at is there bonus extra value if you are Edwin Diaz versus Pete Fairbanks? Actually, that's exactly the two. No, so I don't mean that stuff. Like, if you are like the best reliever, best closer, is it like, but you're twice as good as Pete Fairbanks, let's say, are you worth 2 times as much, or are you worth 2.5 times as much?
Right. Like,
because
so
there's a level
Michael's question
above which,
Michael's question is best understood, I think, from this idea that, like, if you're getting a third baseman and he's really good, or you can get the next guy who's twice as good, he actually is worth more than twice as much in pay, because you have limited space on the roster. And so, like, to generate as many wins as possible, it's disproportionately valuable to concentrate it in one area. And the question is, in a reliever, a back-end reliever, it's almost like, does the math justify it in the same way? And I think the answer would be yes, if you didn't believe that there was the same volatility in relievers, like for that reliever and health, compared to position players, which I think is just not correct, right? Like, relievers, I think, simply have more volatility in the aggregate than position players.
I mean, the aging curve gets me. The velocity is down a little bit for Edwin Diaz. It was 97.4 last year. It was 99.1 2 years ago.
Of course, on the aging, and listen, on the aging side with relievers, we've seen this time and time again, like, for all the rightful grief that relievers get for their volatility year to year, what they do have in the aggregate, I think, is a longer window of peak performance.
They do. He's had 5 straight very good seasons. Like, 4 of them have been elite.
He missed a year. He missed a year, right, because of the WBC.
Yeah, injury. 2023 he did, correct. So the years that he played, and I'm including 2020 in that, but it was still very, very good. Like, those are very good seasons. You know what I mean? And then he had 1 horrible year, and then like 3 good years before. Like, in terms of volatility, he hasn't been very volatile.
Yeah. And, he has he's got like the best stuff in baseball, and that can reduce a lot of that volatility if you're just like the best of
And
them. So
let's also not, let's not forget being a closer is
It's
different
different.
than being a high leverage reliever. It's a different, the way that you're impacting actual, wins and losses. It is more, it hasn't been captured correctly in the stats yet. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't think it's there.
Agreed. But
they're not going to
do it.
So it doesn't matter. Yeah. Don't get excited.
What? Not going to do it.
I do think Pete Fairbanks is a guy that could happen. It's not anything I've heard. Like I said, I heard Helsley and I heard Williams. But Sahadov and Mooney, we're talking about Fairbanks weeks ago. And
there are other guys that I like.
Yeah, there's actually a lot. There's
Luke Weaver, Kyle Finnegan. Like I like
Kyle
these guys.
Finnegan, honestly.
I do.
I think he's got a lot of experience closing. I'm kind of interested.
And I think he was a lot better with the Tigers, right? Like he had been on the Nationals for a long time. I think he changed.
And the Cubs have been on him for a while.
Yeah.
Every time he's been available rumored, it's like,
I think it's because the Tigers did what the Cubs have wanted to do. I think they changed his pitch mix a bit.
Scott Harris.
And, yeah, there you go. And Greenhouse, I forget, his GM is also from the Cubs. Okay, we'll leave it there. We're getting real in the weeds now. This is the BN Cubs podcast. Just want to thank our wonderful sponsors at Ankin Law, 312-6 million.
Just trying to
injury law made personal. I know I'm trying to match Michael's energy. No, but we do appreciate it. Like it's why we get to do the podcast, is because we've got great sponsors, and so appreciate that. And appreciate all the listeners. That's the other half, right? We need sponsors and we need listeners. Michael and I are very low on the totem pole of what's necessary to make this podcast.
Top 3 though, for sure.
Yeah. Addison's probably up there too. So we're probably 4. So thanks to all. And we'll be back at you next week at the end of the winter meetings, hopefully with a lot of fun stuff to discuss.
Oh my God.
So see you guys.